and welcome to She's the Boss, the show that is all about female founders and women doing extraordinary things in business. And I cannot wait to introduce my guest today. Helen McCabe is amazing. She is the founder and MD of Future Women, which we're going to find all about. Formerly the editor-in-chief of Australian Women's Weekly. She launched Nine Honey, and she's also the former content director for Nine Digital. So, wow. Welcome, Helen. It's fantastic to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. You do interview some pretty extraordinary women. So I don't know what my CV is as impressive as some of the women you have interviewed, but it's lovely to be chatting to you.
Well, thank you so much, and you totally fit in. What can I say? So how about we start off with Future Women? Do you want to tell everybody what it actually is and what you're doing with it?
Yeah, sure thing. We launched in 2018, and it's a platform for professional women. We offer three basic memberships, and we try to be super inclusive. If you join as a Red member, we do podcasts, we do a bunch of Facebook Lives. At the moment, we're particularly active talking about what's going on in Canberra and the issue of women's safety.
Yes.
We do some newsletters. If you join as a Gold member, then we give you a taste of training and some speed mentoring. And then we have our corporate membership, which is a Platinum Plus program, which is for mid-career professional women, so your future leaders.
Right.
We've identified that there's a real hunger in corporate Australia to build the pipeline and to build the capability of that next generation of future leaders. In that program, we offer high-level leadership and confidence and presentation skills all the way through to mentoring. And we just finished a 2-day leadership summit coinciding with International Women's Day. So that was just epic and exhausting, and we did it in person and virtually. So we do cater for lots of different needs, but primarily professional women from all over Australia and in some cases around the world.
And so is it online so that you can get to all those regional women as well? Because that's one of the things I know with She's the Boss. I'm getting lots of feedback that the women in regional areas just don't get access to this kind of training and this kind of networking and being able to learn from people that have already succeeded. So, it's really important that we get it out to them. And of course, one of the great gifts of COVID has been that everyone's gone online. So even if they've gone kicking and screaming, they're more used to it now. Has that been part of the strategy?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the interesting things and you raise a really good point, is we partnered with the New South Wales government and the Minister for Women, Bronnie Taylor, who represents regional New South Wales. And we ran this scholarship program and said, we'll put 12 women through our Platinum Plus program. And we launched it sort of in a bit of a dead zone around November, December, and closed the competition in early January. We got 450 applicants, the most extraordinary women all over New South Wales. So it won't surprise you. We brought them all to Sydney for the conference. They sat in the middle of the room. They all went to dinner the night before. Then they sat in the middle of the room. And at lunchtime, I got them to stand up and introduce themselves. They were like the heart and soul of this whole summit. And it just... It really illustrated to me, the enthusiasm. So there are clients who will put their high-performing women into it who are like, do I really need to do this? And I'm a bit busy and I'm a bit important. And then you've got these women that self-selected and then just couldn't have embraced it more enthusiastically. And so the short answer is that is right. You get real energy and excitement around those groups of women. And we're now rolling that out around Australia. So the next territory will be in Queensland. Yeah, super exciting.
Wonderful. Yeah. And you were talking that you said that you're there at that sort of middle management level, I guess. So the younger women who are starting their careers and maybe have been doing it for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I was speaking to somebody who was in recruitment and training for leadership only a few weeks ago, and she was saying that is a group that just gets completely missed because big organisations are like, okay, we've got these female leaders, we need to empower them, let's put them through loads of training, but they don't do very much for those women that really need the skills in order to get up to the leadership roles.
And that is the gap in the market, which we have monopolised, I hope.
Good.
And that was the plan. No, that's right. So so the argument is that we need more women, right? And we're seeing that argument in Canberra. We need them more in the Liberal Party. We need them in boards. And when that happens, you get a different culture. But men and women who run those organisations or make those decisions will quite rightfully say it's really hard to find candidates for those roles. So our work is in making that sure that there are candidates. And in order to do that, you've got to do a couple of things. One, you have to give that group the confidence and the self-belief that they're capable and that their voice will be heard. And if their voice isn't heard, how to go about that. And what we know, and we've got, quite sophisticated data on this, what we know is that what happens with your most capable women, and it's not going to come as a surprise to any of your listeners, is if you've got them in the staff, in your team, the work just flows straight down to them. Yeah. They get all the work, all the pointy, difficult, dotting I's, crossing T's work. So a lot of them are really super burnt out. They're exhausted. Right. They've often got a couple of kids or about to get a couple of kids. They've got a dog, a next door neighbour and a mother or a...
And of course, in corporate culture as well, you get rewarded for long hours. It's kind of, or you used to. I don't know whether that's changed post-COVID, but I mean, surely it's about how smart you work, not how long you work.
Well, that's right. And that's actually a side issue with this group because they are close to burnout. But the core problem is that they start to get more work and then they have that sandwich generation thing hit where they're also responsible for a lot of the work at home. We know it doesn't matter what stage of it doesn't matter whether you're married or not married. If you're in a relationship, you do 75% of the work at home as well as the work of the job. So they start to falter under the pressure. They start to lose confidence. They also get more competitive with the male cohort, with their male colleagues, who then start to undermine them. No, she's a bit hysterical, she's a bit emotional, or they don't go for a run with her because they go for a run with their buddy before the...
Because, of course, the guys have got the eye on the prize as well. They want to get up to those senior management roles and they know it's a bit dog-eat-dog.
And they don't want the woman with the double degree with high distinctions who they're highly suspicious of might be smarter than them having a free run at it, right? Yeah. So this is that group and they are so under pressure. And I have had this conversation in offices with senior corporate leaders and senior HR leaders and senior department heads all over Australia, and it is universal. So what we do is we take them in and we do multiple things for them. One of the key things we do is help them build networks, because if you build a network of buddies in your 30s that are going to have your back, by the time you get to those top roles, you know who to go to for help.
That's right. And that's really how those boys groups are built. They're either meeting at school or they're meeting at uni or in their early 20s and staying friends all the way through.
Yeah, so we're doing a bit of that. And then we're also talking to them about presentation skills. Women hate giving speeches and they hate standing in front of a crowd.
Not all women.
In front of their own staff. So we're sorting that out. So that's the crew, and that's incredibly rewarding. It's really interesting work, and that's what takes up a lot of our time at Future Women.
Fantastic. So now I've got to ask you, what made you leap from Channel 9, where you're obviously working in digital and had been in media for a long time, to run a group called Future Women? What was the light bulb moment? What was the reason for it?
There's a couple of ways I could...
Just a little question.
There's a couple of ways I could answer this. Okay. But I'm going to answer it this way. I worked nearly 7 years on Women's Weekly as editor-in-chief. It's an iconic brand. It often, I used to say, it doesn't really matter what various publishers or editors have done with the brand, and everyone's tried to do different things. It's sort of so big that you can't really reinvent it. It is what it is. No,
and for anyone listening outside of Australia, it's easily Australia's biggest women's magazine, I would have thought.
And one of the, if not the most influential product for women in the country. So I was really interested in how that brand came to be. And when Kerry Packer launched it, it was at a time when there was no news for women. So newspapers came out, but they were written for men, by men, and about men. Yeah. And so he launched Women's Weekly as an antidote to that, to give women their own, I guess, media format. Yeah. Yeah. So I was very much thinking around what does that look like in 2030 or 2025 even as print slowly, and if print doesn't and Women's Weekly is a force for the next 100 years, then fantastic. But I did think there was an opportunity to reinvent a brand like that. Now, again, I'm not.
Okay.
I don't think I'm confident or arrogant enough to say that I will achieve that. There's just no way that can be replicated, because it was an extraordinary time and extraordinary.
Oh well, maybe you will in a different way. I mean, is that
so I've carved off a particular niche of it, and it's an attempt to kind of provide a brand for the next generation of young women. And we're not in print at the moment, but we might do something in print.
Oh, okay.
Actually, that's not true. We've done a book. We do have our own. We have another one coming out. But we don't have a magazine as such, or a newspaper as such. But we do pretty much everything else.
Right. Oh, really fascinating. Okay, so Helen, you are an amazing woman. You have obviously done incredible things. Can I take you back to Helen at high school maybe, and tell us how your career has evolved and how you've reached these great heights of, doing the things that you've been doing? Where did you start off? How did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town outside of Adelaide called Hamley Bridge, which is a little farming community in the Adelaide Plains. My father was a third-generation farmer in that district, and I have three brothers. One was a AFL footballer and is now a farmer. The other one's a farmer, and I have a brother who's a lawyer. Okay. And they're all still there. They still live there, and I've got 10 nieces and nephews. And I
right.
But I went off to boarding school, did journalism in South Australia, because I had a passion for, I think I would probably describe it as that kind of social justice-y thing that you get as a young schoolgirl.
So how old's this? I mean, at what stage did you start getting interested in that kind of thing? That's pretty sophisticated for a schoolgirl.
Well, 14. I was 14 or 15 when I decided I wanted to be a journalist. But I was at an all-girls boarding school being educated by the nuns, who I think are some of the most fiercely feminist women you're ever going to come across. And I think they were very, very social justice minded. We were always off to visit nursing homes and collecting for the homeless and all that kind of stuff. So there was a bit of that in me. And I've always been interested in politics. So politics was probably one of the themes throughout my entire career that I've taken from then all the way through to FW.
Right. And so did the nuns did they get that you were interested in this stuff? Were you encouraged to if you wanted to do journalism, to just go for it?
Oh, unbelievably so. I mean,
really?
I'm a big advocate for same-sex schools for girls. I think there's an enormous advantage for young women.
I have to say, I agree. I was lucky enough to go to pretty much all girls schools, and it's very good at giving you a real sense of worth, I think, and a sense of I can do anything.
Yeah. And certainly there was one nun called Sister Veronica who was very supportive of my early days. Was very unhappy when I went into tabloid journalism, because I ended up working on tabloids in Sydney, and I got quite a lecture at one point.
Was that so? So we're jumping ahead too much, and I'm dying to hear this. So you finished school, wanting to do journalism. What did you do first? Is this when politics came in?
Worked very hard to get into the journalism degree. I was a goody two shoes from way back. Got into the journalism degree, but was again just crazy about doing well at it. So immediately started applying for part-time jobs. So I worked at Channel 10, listening to the overnight police scanners, which gave me my first taste of what it looks like to be a victim of family violence, and have the police turn up in the 1990s and have us all just find out it's domestic.
Thank God it's coming out now. I mean, it is everywhere. I feel like I'm hearing it everywhere, but thank God it's coming out. When you think of all those things happening behind closed doors for so many years.
We used to just turn up and be told it was domestic and go home, we'd pack up our cameras and go home. Oh, my
God.
So I was at Channel 10. I wrote the weather for the ABC for a little bit, and then I worked at a radio station for a few months, but I resigned because I hated it.
How did you get all these jobs? What were you doing? Approaching them directly?
Yes, and I now know that is really easy to do if you're a super keen young journo. Everyone will help you out, and I got enormously assisted. Quickly went into television. I think I was at Channel 7 by the time I was 20.
Gosh.
And I was on air, which is kind of crazy,
unusual. Yeah.
And then I and then I got transferred to Canberra.
Would you want? Was this a choice? Did you say I want to do politics, or were you just sent there and then built a love of it afterwards?
No, I was already obsessed with politics.
Right.
I know I'm sounding real weird, really
No,
weird now.
you're not.
Thanks,
you're
Jules,
not. It's totally not what I do.
I was working in the Channel 7 newsroom in Adelaide, and the Channel 7 correspondent came through on a on a story.
Yeah.
And could see that I was keen, rang up about, I don't know, a month later and said, would you like a job in Canberra? And I said, sure.
Wow.
And so I packed up and moved to Canberra in about, I think it was like January, February 1993. And
roughly how old are you then? Are you still in your early 20s?
I think I'm 22. I think that's roughly 22, 23.
Right.
My maths is not good.
So young girl arriving in Canberra with all those blokes and all those revered kind of journalists. How was that?
Well, interesting, right? So if you and I had done this interview like about 4 weeks ago, I would just tell the story of another girl goes to Canberra to be a political correspondent. But of course now it's really interesting given interesting and disturbing given the Brittany Higgins story and all of the stories coming out in Canberra.
It is, and actually I think I know somebody who I think must have been there roughly the same time as you, and she sent me a message and said, I can't put this up on social media, but myself and a whole lot of other journalists couldn't risk our careers bringing up what was going on, but we could see it all the time. Is that what you felt as well? I'm putting you on the spot here.
The short answer is no.
Right.
No, and I've had to do a lot of introspection about why. The quick version is I think because I was one of the very few commercial television journalists, female commercial television journalists.
Yeah.
Firstly, I thought I was a bit anonymous and no one really knew. I was so young and so naive and so stupid, to be honest.
Not so stupid. You managed to get yourself there.
Well, yeah, but it
just didn't know what you were doing so much.
I was really out of my depths.
Yeah, right.
And that I think there's a certain level of power that comes with some of the reporters around me, were people like at Channel 9, it was Peter Harvey and Laurie Oakes.
Big names.
In my office, there was people like Glenn Milne and Dennis Grant. They were revered figures in Canberra. I think I was protected by that.
Right. That kind of makes sense. That makes sense that they would have, especially if they kind of had you under their wing, everyone would have known not to go near you.
Yeah. I mean, I did suffer from that kind of salacious rumour mill that, she must be sleeping with somebody to be there. I saw her with a set of ties with one of the, the new television reporters. Clearly she's sleeping with him.
Shagging him.
Yeah, there was all of that.
That is so sad, isn't it, that happens? But
those rumours are still rumours that I had back then are still live. Like I'll hear them to this day.
Right.
But you learn to live with that, right? So you get over that.
Yeah, of course.
But so that was Canberra, 10 years in Canberra. Then I moved to News Corporation. I won't give you
but tell me, I just want to know the whys. Why did you leave Canberra and why did you decide to go to News Corp?
Okay, so I was standing in the news room a week before Christmas and a fax came out of the fax machine that said, your contract's being terminated and Stan Grant is going to be in your job. So I got sacked by fax in about 1996 in television. Took 3 or 4 months off travelling around Asia, got a job back in the press gallery working in newspapers, which was much more suited to me. I was pretty rubbish as a television reporter.
Why did you like newspapers over TV?
I love stories. I love telling stories and
being able to write them, I guess, in your PJs rather than having to get all glammed up.
I loved breaking news and newspapers broke news stories. Television, it's much harder to break big television stories.
Right. And that's kind of true to today, isn't it? I mean, really still daily metro newspapers are the lead for news.
Yes. Yeah. And so in many ways, it was like that kind of moment where I went, okay, television's been an incredible learning experience, but I've always sort of wanted to win the Walkleys, like the most prestigious awards.
Yep.
And it's much harder as a young blonde in television than it's ever going to be as a young blonde in newspapers. So I made the jump.
Went.
Yeah. And that proved to be one of the smartest things like all things when something goes wrong and you get sacked or you
Well, that's
get
I
dumped
guess
or
that's the point of me doing these interviews in the first place. I want people to realise that your career doesn't always go in a straight line, and what can seem like a disaster can actually be a gift. And
it always
obviously
is.
for you, you got out of TV and you went to something that you've stayed in for so many years because you loved it.
Yeah, where I was supposed to be. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're working for News Corp. What did you do and how did that all evolve?
I was terrified because I'd never worked in newspapers and I was in the press gallery. So again, I go down the other end of the corridor and work with some of the biggest names in print. The News Corp office has Paul Kelly and Dennis Shanahan and there was a Nikki Savas and anyway, like it's just a catalogue of the biggest names. Laura Tingle was across the corridor, Lenore Taylor, etc.
Right.
So I was terrified.
So some great role models for you as well, obviously.
Great,
if you've
but
got
actually, one of the most important things that happened during that period was my intake in the News Corp office. So alongside of me was Annabelle Crabb, Phil Curry, David Luff, who went on to work for John Howard for 10 years.
So you were
David
a golden
Pemberton.
group.
Yeah, it was a really special time. David Pemberton was editor of the Daily Telegraph for years. I interviewed yesterday, and still a great columnist.
Amazing.
It's still an amazing newsbreaker for the Australian. So I actually formed, I guess, the bedrock of my journalistic friendships. Samantha Maiden, who broke the Brittany Higgins story at that period of time, and stayed there. But then I got sent to London. I covered the 1998 Pauline Hanson election campaign, which there were many books and documentaries written about.
How does that link with London, or it doesn't? You just went to London and then you did this.
Off the back of that.
How fantastic, though, to be sent over there.
I had an amazing election campaign where we broke a lot of stories, and then News Corp sent me to London. Did 2 years as the correspondent in London.
Did you like it?
Oh, incredible! Like this is so. Can I just remind you? I'm just a country kid from South Australia, whose whole ambition was to work on the Adelaide Advertiser.
And look at where you were. I mean, when you found yourself in London, you must have pinched yourself.
By the time I'm 33, I've done 10 years in the Canberra Press Gallery for television and print, and now I'm a correspondent in London. I like it. It was every day I've been incredidly grateful. It was. Christopher Skase died. I'm on a plane.
You were still over there when he died, and you did because he escaped, didn't he? I mean, for anyone, there might be young people watching that don't know about him who was about to go into receivership or bankrupt, and he just disappeared over to Spain and stayed there till he died, and just could never come home. But
and I covered his funeral, but nobody in Australia believed he'd actually died. They thought it was another
scam
ruse that he'd made it up. And so I was having these crazy conversations with my news director about my chief of staff about, can you prove it? I'm like, what, you want me in the morgue? Well, yes, if you can. Remember
my God.
I did all sorts of stupid things. I really did.
Right. No, but fantastic.
Tabloid. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what made you go from tabloid? I'm assuming. Well, so what was the next thing? I was going to say Women's Weekly, but maybe it wasn't straight away.
No. Lots happened in between there. I came back to Australia. Cole Allen, the very, very famous tabloid editor, and I say that because he was editor-in-chief in the New York Times, the New York Post for 10 or 15 years.
It's not a name I know, but it's good that you're explaining who these people are.
He's the most famous tabloid editor probably ever produced in this country. And he rang me in London and said, come back, I want you back here, I want you to take up a desk. I went, right. On the Daily Telegraph.
Sir, I'll be there.
So I did that. In the time that I did that, he got posted to New York. So when I time I arrived back in Australia, he was already the editor-in-chief in New York. So didn't end up working for him.
Was there any urge to go to New York, though? Was there any kind of, I'm going to follow him and go over there? Or it was, I've just got to London, I'm going to stick with what I'm here for?
Look, my strong feeling after 2 years in London was I'd love to have given Fleet Street a crack because I just like challenging myself a little bit. But I realised then that I didn't need that big a life. I like Australia. There's something very attractive about being a big fish in a small pond rather than a small anonymous person in a sea of talent, I guess, that you get a lot of in Europe. Yes, my family was all in South Australia are farmers, and I just realised that Sydney was far enough away
Yeah.
from them, and it's a long way away from them. It was during COVID. So I kind of took the decision that my life would be in Australia and not elsewhere. That doesn't mean I won't do a lot of travel and I wouldn't, but I don't
based
have
in
that
Australia.
urging. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did 5 years in London, and I know at the end I went, I love this city, but I just want to get home. I want to see open skies. I want to be able to blow my nose and it's not black. You know, I want to have tea and it doesn't have skin on it. Little things like that in London.
Get onto a train and not have that dehumanizing experience of pressing up against a complete stranger, you know, who smells of mold because they've just got caught in the rain, you know?
Yeah, very true. Okay, so you came back.
Yeah.
What did you come back to do, and what happened after that?
So I decided I needed to I've been a correspondent. I've been in the Canberra bureau and then the London bureau, and I didn't really know how newspapers actually came together. You know, I understood how television stories came together and how television newsrooms worked, but I didn't know how newspapers did. So I came back to a production role.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Right. What was it? What was it?
I was assistant night editor.
And just for the people that are listening that might know nothing about newspapers, what is a production role? Because I'm assuming it's about the printing side of things.
Well, sort of. The stories come into one desk, and that's usually the chief of staff. So that chief of staff commissions stories, gets them in, and on the Daily Telegraph, you yell at them. On the Australian, you ask politely. But on the Australian, you go, hey, where's that story about New South Wales government imploding? And they go, 5 minutes. And then they send it to you, and you that's when you pull it apart. You go, I need this fact.
So you were editing it, like going through and
editing. Yeah,
right.
You edited it. So you edited it, then you decided where it went on the page. You designed the page with a designer. And then you check the page and you send it to the printing presses, and then they send it back to you, and you make sure that it's got the right date on it and the right
how
page
fascinating. I worked in newspapers for about 5 or 6 years when I was younger, and we were using bromides in those days, which for anyone that doesn't know was they'd get a story, push it out on basically a piece of paper, cut out the bits that they didn't want, and then stick it with wax onto a page. Was quite
in the
crazy,
time that I was there, it changed quite quickly, and I did that role for a few years, and then I went to the Australian. And again, this was just really about another ambition. I'd never worked on a broadsheet. I'd never worked on the national broadsheet. You've got to remember, I'm a politics obsessed person, journalist, and
the Australian was perfect for you for that.
Australian was perfect, and I had one of the most enjoyable periods of my career working on the Australian. Yeah.
How long were you there for? Roughly
2-3 years, and then I was made deputy editor of the Sunday Telegraph.
Wow!
So I go back to tabloids.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I should have. I mean, if I'd known that, I would have introduced that at the beginning as well, because that is pretty amazing. Deputy editor.
Yeah, that was a weekly paper, and it was a beast of a thing. And we had a pretty. I was working for an editor called Neil Breen. We had a pretty. Wild ride in that job, where we really were very news orientated. As I said, I was a very hungry news reporter. I, was pretty, aggressive and.
What's the word, aggressive? Well, you had to be. I mean,
hardcore.
that. And I guess that's part of what we're talking about with women in the workplace, that you need to have some aggression. But we also, I guess, are hoping that it's going to temper a little bit, and we don't need quite as much as we've had before. So,
and that I think that's what I think I grew up in the role as a journalist when I went to Women's Weekly.
So when did that happen? Straight from the Australian?
From the Sunday Telegraph.
Sunday Telegraph, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so the Sunday Telegraph was another 2 or 3 years.
And then Women's Weekly, I mean, that is such a leap for a newspaper woman who's been interested in politics. Yeah. Other than, obviously, it's massive. And, I mean, in those days, I don't know whether it is still now, but it had sort of 600,000 plus copies being sold every month. Is that sort of the period when you were there?
That's right, yeah. And
amazing.
I think if you read any of the copy, it was quite a media story at the time that they'd given the job to a person
young
that had
woman.
no understanding of magazines, and one who was well known to be a bit overly interested in politics.
So did that just stiffen your determination to make it work and show them all? Oh, you didn't care?
I just didn't care. No, right. Because I didn't really have any template actually to mold myself around, because I hadn't come
Were you
from
excited?
magazines.
Were you excited about the opportunity?
Excited.
Right.
I had this extraordinary vehicle to do something with.
Yeah.
And
so what did you do with it?
Yeah, well, my ambition was to break stories and to do stories that nobody else was doing. And at that stage, the news cycle was moving very quickly in newspapers, and newspapers were struggling with resourcing. So I had the ability to kind of sit back off the news cycle and go, I wonder what that person's doing in that story, and then go and find them. I mean, I think work on the story methodically and slowly and with great attention to care and detail.
Because it is beautiful photography and great stories, and as you say, nearly always stories you won't see anywhere else.
That's right.
Which is really clever of Women's Weekly to even retain that now in a world of digital media when everyone's breaking stories everywhere.
Correct.
So how long were you there for?
I did 6.5 years.
Oh wow. And what happened in that time? Can you give us a couple of highlights?
Oh my God, yes. Highlights.
Or lowlights, doesn't matter.
It was quite look, my critics will say that I did a lot of things terrible. My fans will say that it was a very active news time for the magazine, where we did break a lot of stories. I guess the really big ones were we got to, for the 80th birthday, we went to the palace in Denmark and photographed and interviewed Princess Mary.
Wow, that is big.
Hadn't been done in 10 or 15 years. It hasn't been done since, I think.
Yeah.
We also did an interview with Prince Charles, who'd never been interviewed
before
since the early 70s or something.
Wow.
We put Julia Guillard on the cover for when she was first elevated to be the first female Prime Minister, which was highly controversial.
Yeah.
It was even more controversial when we photographed her with a kangaroo some years later.
It's so funny as you say this, controversial, and you think you're only taking a photo of an amazing woman with a kangaroo, but it's so funny how controversy is built up. And I guess one of the things I wanted to talk to you about when you were saying, you have your critics and you had your fans, which I guess we all have, and the more that you put yourself out there, the more you're going to open yourself up to that.
Yeah.
Have you got any advice for how you manage that? Because there'll be a lot of people, I think anyway, there are a lot of women who say, I'd like to be successful, but I'm scared that people will try and bring me down. And you've got to keep going on your path. But I'm interested as to how you might have managed that. Ignore the haters.
I think at the time I was pretty fearless and I didn't really care. I sort of knew what I wanted to do and I did it.
Yeah.
And I listened a little bit more to my fans than I did my critics, because I felt that I was on the right path.
Well, I was going to say my advice is always ignore the haters. But there's a but though.
But the haters did get to me eventually. And they did certainly give it a good crack.
Made your life miserable.
Well, if you get told over and over again in print you're a certain type of person that you don't really identify with, you kind of start to wonder. It was quite helpful though. It was actually really helpful, because what it meant was I had to again be a little bit introspective about who I am and who I wanted to be. A bit like, I don't want to be on the global stage as a reporter. I'm very happy to be working in Australia. I realised that I'm actually not great at the public profile. I don't really want it. I don't really need it.
It just comes with the territory, unfortunately.
Yeah, so what I did since then was really try to reduce my profile and just go, I'm not available to talk on every news story. I'm not a royal commentator. I'm not a commentator on Ida Buttrose. I get asked about her all the time.
Right.
And I just decided that I'm going to reduce my profile and live a bit more, a quieter existence. Now, some people would say, and Anna Bligh is really interesting on this, and I interviewed her for the podcast that I do around leadership.
Yeah.
And she just said, unless there are critics, so I'm talking to the people who are out there on the high wire, unless there were critics, she would say, I don't even know that I'm alive. Like that's what making
Wow.
a difference. Yeah, that's what making
Yeah.
a difference means. So, get
Interesting.
out there on the high wire and go for it, because that's what life is about. And when she was telling me this, I was like, oh gosh, if I really just let them get to me.
Yeah.
But I am very comfortable with sort of taking a bit more of a backseat. I recognise that that's not always the case when you run your own brand. And I recognise...
But to be able to go down to the supermarket in your crappy clothes with no makeup on and not feel like people are judging you or looking at you is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and look, I've never really had that problem because I've not been a television host as such. Well, I did do a little bit of it ages ago, but I've never really had that problem, and I'm just not that good at it. So I've kind of worked out what I think I know what I'm good at. Some days I wonder about that, but especially as I get older and I forget what day it is and where my car keys are. But
that happens to all of us.
I think it did get to me. And I also had a sense that, and it's really interesting in the current debate around women, that it's just not really liked. People don't really like high-profile women. They just don't like us very much.
I know, but that's a weird Australian thing. I don't know why we don't like them. I mean, I love them. I just think that if we could get more exposure to them, we'd all be inspired to do more things and be braver ourselves. But
and Jules, I think you actually raise a really valid point. If there were more of them,
yes,
it would.
And there are more that are visible. Yeah.
Correct. And one of my ambitions with FW is actually to elevate more women onto the national stage and their voices.
Yeah, great.
Because it is, the part of the problem is if you just see the same old person all the time, they do start to give you the shits, right?
Yeah, of course.
We
want variety. We want lots and lots and lots of them. The more the merrier.
Of course.
Now, I hate to say this, but we haven't got very much longer, and I want to hear about how you ended up at Channel 9. And I think you said to me at some stage, I don't know whether that's true, but you're on the board or were on the board. Just tell me a little bit about that, because those are the sorts of things that we all want as women, want to see more women on boards. We want to see women with higher profiles. And you were obviously really at the tippy top of television then, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So how did that all evolve?
I got to know Hugh Marks through my work at The Weekly because he was running a management company of talent. So we'd had a couple of stoushes actually over a couple of issues with some talent that he was looking after. And he said, I've got an idea. Would you come and launch a digital women's lifestyle brand for 9?
Right.
And I'd never done digital.
Right.
So it was a big gap
change.
in my CV. Again, I think I hadn't done it, so I wanted to do it. I was also frustrated at The Weekly that I wasn't able to have more of a say over the digital footprint of Women's Weekly, which is pretty standard media behaviour at the time. Keep the editors doing print and the smart men doing digital will do digital. Doesn't work, but it didn't work back then, I don't think. So
you made the leap and went with him to 9 Honey, which, can I just say, I loathe the name Honey as a women's channel, but that's a whole other thing.
That was a name I inherited. I get the credit for.
I can't imagine you would have come up with it yourself. I don't believe that. Who did? Was it a woman or a man?
Who
you don't know?
Came up with the name?
The word Honey,
Yeah, it was a woman,
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and they were really passionate about it in the digital business at the time. So I was trying to culturally bring two teams together, and I knew getting rid of that name would be a big problem.
Yeah, no. So you just go with it.
Yeah, to go with it and make it what we wanted it to be. And I was also in a hurry to do it because it was
overdue.
9 wanted a women's lifestyle network for advertising reasons quite quickly. So we launched that, but at the same time I'd already pitched FW. And so I did 9.com.au, Honey, and then 9 supported me with the launch of Future Women. So to explain the strategy, we had a mass market freemium model around Honey, and I was developing a subscription model around a premium audience.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the strategy.
Amazing. Look, I hate to say it, but we've run out of time. And honestly,
Sure.
I could have turned this into a 3-hour interview because you are absolutely fascinating. If anybody wants to do the Future Woman program, what's the best way for them to do it and or get hold of you?
Yeah, go to futurewomen.com. It's all there. So
Yep.
where is your starting? There's a free 3-month trial available
Oh,
at the
great.
moment.
Great.
So that's a good way to have a bit of a look at us. I would really urge everyone to get into the closed Facebook community to get a sense of actually what's going on around what we're talking about. But otherwise, our
great.
training modules and stuff are gold, all the way to if you've got a lot of corporate listeners, definitely find me and email me and we can talk about corporate packages.
Wonderful. Well, honestly, Helen, I don't know what to say. You're fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing your story, and what a story it is. And I just want to say a big thank you for being my guest, and look forward to seeing what you do with Future Women over the next few years.
And Jules, good luck with your ventures as well as a female entrepreneur in the media space. It's a really exciting place to be. So if there's ever anything we can do to help, but good luck with it as well. It's fun to talk to a fellow female entrepreneur.
I love it. Thank you so much.